The Galactic Museum of Extinct Species floated in the darkness of space like a giant metal flower, its many wings stretching out toward distant stars that humans had only dreamed of visiting a century ago. Yuna Park pressed her small face against the transport window and watched the station grow larger and larger until it filled her entire view. "Appa, it is so big," she said to her father, her breath leaving a circle of fog on the glass star. Jinho Park smiled at his daughter and gently fixed the collar of her jacket, making sure she would be warm enough when they stepped onto the station. The museum holds artifacts from over 2,000 extinct species. "Yuna," he said, "some of them disappeared before humans even learned to make fire." Yuna's eyes grew wide with wonder, and she bounced in her seat as the transport began its docking sequence. The museum was everything Yuna had imagined and more, with halls so tall that clouds actually formed near the ceiling and displays that glowed with soft blue and purple lights. Aliens of every shape and size walked past them, some tall and thin like walking sticks, others round and floating like soap bubbles with faces, and a few that looked like nothing Yuna could describe with her 7-year-old vocabulary. Her father held her hand tight as they followed their guide, a Cathari named Curator Velith, who stood nearly 3 meters tall and had 6 arms that moved constantly as he spoke. "The Extinction Hall contains our most precious and tragic collection," Velith explained, his voice clicking and buzzing in ways that the translator in Yuna's ear turned into words. "Species that will never walk or swim or fly again, preserved here so the galaxy never forgets what was lost." Yuna felt sad hearing this, and she squeezed her father's hand harder. They passed display after display, each one telling a story of a species that had vanished forever, some killed by disease, others by war, and many simply fading away when their home worlds changed. Too much for them to survive, but it was the last display in the hall that made Yuna stop walking. Entirely inside a glass case that reached up toward the distant ceiling sat an egg larger than Yuna herself, covered in scales that might have once been beautiful shades of red and gold, but now looked gray and lifeless. "The Dracorian egg," Curator Velith said with something like sadness in his clicking voice. "The last of their kind, cold for 800 years. A reminder of a species that once ruled 3 star systems and made even the mightiest empires tremble." Yuna could not look away from the egg. "Why is it so sad looking?" she asked. Her father knelt beside her and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "The Dracorians went extinct a very long time ago, sweetheart," he said. "Their eggs need something special to hatch, something nobody has ever figured out, so this one just sits here, waiting for something that will never come." Yuna felt her heart squeeze tight in her chest, the way it did when she saw stray cats in the rain or when other children at school sat alone at lunch. "Can I look at it closer?" she asked. The Park looked at Curator Velith, who waved one of his 6 arms in what the translator interpreted as permission. "Just for a moment," Velith said. "We have many more exhibits to see." Yuna walked slowly toward the display case while her father turned to ask Velith questions about the Dracorian history, their voices fading into background noise as she got closer and closer to the egg up close. She could see the scales better, could see how they overlapped like the shingles on a roof, could see tiny cracks running through them like dry skin in winter. "You look so lonely," Yuna whispered, pressing her palm against the glass. The egg did not move, did not respond, because of course it would not respond. It had been dead for 800 years. Every scientist in the galaxy had said so, but Yuna was 7 years old. And 7-year-olds do not always listen to what scientists say. She looked around and saw that her father was still talking to Velith, that no guards were watching, that she was completely alone with the lonely egg. The lock on the display case was a simple one. designed by aliens who never imagined that a small human child might try to open it. Because what child would want to touch a dead relic from a dead species? Yuna figured it out in seconds, her small fingers finding the release mechanism that was placed too high for most alien children, but just right for a human girl standing on her tiptoes. The glass slid open without a sound cold. Air rushed out and made Yuna shiver, but she did not hesitate. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around the massive egg as far as they could reach, pressing her cheek against the rough scales. "You should not be so cold and alone," she whispered. "I am here now. Do not be sad anymore." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the egg grew warm against her cheek. So warm that she gasped, and then alarms began to scream throughout the entire museum. Curator Velas spun around so fast that two of his arms knocked over a display stand, his compound eyes reflecting the flashing red lights that had begun strobing throughout the hall. "What have you done?" he shouted, but Yuna did not answer because she was too busy staring at the egg she still held in her arms. It was glowing now, soft orange and red light pulsing from between the scales like a heartbeat and deep inside. Something was moving. Curator Velas stumbled backward, his 6 arms trembling as he looked at the readings on his scanning device. "This is impossible," he said, his voice barely a whisper that the translator almost could not catch. "This is completely impossible." Dr. Park ran to his daughter and dropped to his knees beside her, his face pale with shock. "Yuna, what did you do?" Yuna looked up at her father with tears of joy in her eyes and the biggest smile he had ever seen on her face. "I just hugged it." "Appa," she said. "I just told it that it was not alone anymore." The egg pulsed again, brighter this time, and the thing inside moved once more. After 800 years of silence, the last Dracorian was waking up. Within 1 hour, Station Vareth Prime went into complete lockdown, with every door sealed and every ship forbidden from leaving or arriving within 2 hours. Representatives from 15 different species had demanded access to the Extinction Hall within 3 hours. The impossible had been confirmed by every scientist on the station. The egg was alive. High Scientist Morath of the Velnoxy Collective stood before the display case with all 4 of his eyes narrowed in suspicion, his gray skin seeming to darken with each reading he took from his equipment. "There must be contamination," he said, his voice cold and sharp like ice breaking. "The human child must have introduced some bacteria or chemical compound. Perhaps something from that death world they call home." Dr. Jinho Park stood protectively in front of Yuna, who still refused to move more than a few steps away from the glowing egg. "My daughter did nothing except hug the egg," he said, trying to keep his voice calm despite the anger building in his chest. "She is a child, not a weapon. Humans are Deathworlders," Morath replied without looking at him. "You survive conditions that would kill most species in the galaxy. You carry diseases that do not affect you but devastate entire populations. You are walking disasters wrapped in soft skin. That is enough." A new voice called out from the entrance to the hall. Ambassador Xiang Jin. Quan walked in with the confidence of someone who had spent decades dealing with aliens who underestimated humanity. Her formal uniform crisp and her expression leaving no room for argument. "This child is a human citizen under my protection," she said, stopping directly in front of Morath and staring up at him without fear despite being half his height. "You will speak about her with respect or you will not speak at all." Morath made a sound that the translator could not properly convert, but that sounded very much like a sneer. "Your species has been in the galactic community for barely a century," he said. "You do not give orders here." "I am not giving orders," Ambassador Quan replied with a smile that held no warmth. "I am making statements of fact, and here is another one. Until we understand what happened, this child stays with the egg." A cry from behind them made everyone turn. Yuna had pressed her hand against the glass of the case, and tears were streaming down her face. "They want to hurt my baby," she sobbed. "I can hear them talking about taking the egg away and cutting it open to study it. Please, do not let them hurt my baby." Her father rushed to her side and wrapped her in his arms. "No one is going to hurt anything," he said, shooting a warning look at the gathered aliens. "I promise you, Yuna." But even as he spoke, something strange happened. The egg began to glow brighter, its light pulsing faster, and the movement inside became more urgent. High Scientist Morith stumbled backward as his equipment began giving readings that made no sense. "The heartbeat," he said, his voice losing its cold edge and filling with something like fear. "The heartbeat inside the egg is synchronizing with the child's heartbeat. How is this possible?" Ambassador Quan stepped closer to the display, her eyes wide as she watched the egg pulse in perfect rhythm with Yuna's breathing. "Get me everything we have on Dracorian biology," she said quietly. "Every text, every study, every legend. I want it all translated and on my screen within the hour." The translations came faster than expected, because several species had been studying the Dracorians for centuries, trying to understand how such powerful creatures had simply disappeared. Elderly Morvathi named Wraithos was brought to the station. His scales faded with age, but his mind still sharp as starlight. He read through the ancient texts with trembling hands. And when he finally looked up, his eyes were wet with tears. "We were fools," he said softly. "All of us, for 800 years. We were complete fools." Ambassador Quan leaned forward in her chair. "Explain, Elder." Wraithos set down the texts and gestured toward the display case, where Yuna sat with her back against the glass, humming a soft song to the egg inside. "Dracorian eggs do not respond to heat or technology or any scientific method of incubation," he said. "They respond to emotional bonds, to love, to connection so deep that it reaches the soul itself." Morith scoffed from across the room. "Ridiculous superstition, is it?" Wraithos replied. "The Dracorians bonded for life with a single partner species, a species called the Vendari, who were gentle and kind and loved the dragons with all their hearts. When the Vendari were wiped out in a war, the Dracorians had no one left to bond with. Their eggs went cold because there was no one left who could love them the way they needed to be loved." The room fell silent. Ambassador Quan looked at Yuna, who had stopped humming and was now whispering softly to the egg, telling it stories about her home on Earth, about her cat named Nabi, about her favorite foods and her dreams for the future. "And humans?" Quan asked, already knowing the answer. Elder Wraithos smiled for the first time since arriving on the station. "No species in the entire galaxy forms emotional attachments as quickly and as deeply as humans do," he said. "You love fiercely. You love completely. You love things that are broken and cold and different from yourselves without hesitation. You love even when it makes no logical sense to do so." He pointed at Yuna. That child looked at an egg that had been dead for 800 years. And instead of seeing a relic, she saw something lonely that needed to be loved. And so she loved it, immediately, unconditionally. With her whole heart, the egg pulsed again. Its glow now so bright that it lit up the entire hall, and the egg felt it. Wraithos continued. For the first time in 8 centuries, the egg felt a connection worthy of a Dracorian bond. Morith had no response. His 4 eyes fixed on the readings that confirmed everything the old scholar had said. Ambassador Quan stood and walked slowly toward the display case, kneeling beside Yuna and putting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Yuna," she said softly, "I think you just did something that no one else in the galaxy could do." Yuna looked up at her with innocent eyes. "I just did not want it to be lonely anymore," she said inside the egg. The heartbeat grew stronger, and for a moment, everyone in the room could swear they heard a sound that had not been heard in 800 years, the sound of a dragon about to wake up. News of the awakening egg spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, carried on communication networks that buzzed with disbelief and wonder and fernet. All of that fear was unfounded. The Kralith Collective had been enemies of the Dracorians for millennia, had celebrated when the last of the great dragons disappeared, had built their empire on the bones of worlds that the Dracorians could no longer protect, and now they watched the news feeds with cold fury in their hearts. This cannot be allowed, High Commander Zorvac said from the bridge of his warship, his armored scales clicking together as he clenched his massive fists. One dragon will become many, and when there are many, they will remember what we did to their allies. They will remember, and they will seek revenge. His advisors murmured in agreement, and within hours, a fleet of Kralith warships began moving towards Station Vareth Prime back on the station. Commander Tyan Ru had arrived with a small squad of human marines. Her orders simple: protect the child at all costs. Ambassador Quan was not exaggerating about the threats, Ru said as she reviewed the security feeds, her sharp eyes catching every potential danger. We have intercepted 17 assassination attempts in the past 12 hours alone, most targeting the girl, a few targeting the egg directly. Dr. Jinho Park sat beside his sleeping daughter, his face pale from exhaustion and worry, a bandage wrapped around his arm from where a Kralith agent had cut him during an attack that morning. She is 7 years old, he said quietly. She just wanted to hug a sad egg. She did not ask for any of this. Commander Ru nodded with understanding. That is exactly why she must be protected, she said. Innocence like hers is rare, and apparently, it is exactly what the galaxy needed. Elder Vrathos had been studying the egg non-stop since his arrival, and what he discovered made even the most skeptical scientists reconsider everything they thought they knew. The bond is strengthening, he announced during an emergency meeting of the station's leadership. The egg is not just responding to the child. It is connecting to her on a level we cannot measure. They are becoming linked in a way that has not been seen since the days when Dracorians and Vendari walked together, High Scientist Morath, who had become much quieter since learning the truth, raised one of his 4 hands. What does this mean for the child? He asked, genuine concern replacing his earlier hostility. It means they will share emotions, possibly even thoughts as the dragon matures, Vrathos explained. It means that hurting one will hurt the other, and protecting one will protect both. Ambassador Quan processed this information with a diplomat's careful consideration. So anyone who tries to harm Yuna will make an enemy of a Dracorian, she said. And anyone who tries to harm the dragon will have to go through a human child who has bonded with it. Precisely. Vrathos confirmed. An alarm suddenly blared through the station. Red lights flashing as an automated voice announced incoming hostile vessels. Commander Ru was on her feet immediately, her hand moving to the weapon at her side. The Kralith, she said. They made their move faster than we expected. The next few hours were chaos and terror mixed together. Kralith soldiers breached the station through service ports. Their goal clear: reach the egg and destroy it before the dragon could hatch. Dr. Park had been moved to a medical bay to treat his worsening wound, which left Yuna with only Commander Ru and 2 Marines as her protection when the Kralith found them. Get behind me, Ru ordered, placing herself between Yuna and the 4 armored soldiers who had cornered them in the extinction. All the lead Kralith laughed, a horrible grinding sound that made Yuna cover her ears. 1 human soldier against 4 Kralith warriors, he said. Your species truly is as foolish as the stories say. Ru did not respond with words. She responded by dropping the first soldier, with a shot so precise that even his armor could not save him. The remaining 3 charged forward with roars of Raga. Yuna watched in horror as Commander Ru fought like nothing she had ever seen, moving and striking and shooting with a skill that seemed impossible. But even she could not be everywhere at once. Kralith soldier got past her and lunged toward the display case, a plasma cutter in his clawed hand, ready to melt through the glass and destroy the egg inside. No! Una screamed, throwing herself between the soldier and the case. The Kralith hesitated for just a moment, surprised that such a small creature would dare to stand against him, and in that moment, the egg-cracked light poured out from the fracture, bright as a star, hot as a furnace, and a sound emerged that had not been heard in 800 years. A roar. Not a full roar, not yet, but the promise of one. The first cry of something ancient and powerful and alive. The Kralith stumbled backward as the crack widened, as more light spilled out, as something inside pushed against the shell that had held it prisoner for 8 centuries. Shuna turned and pressed her hands against the case, tears streaming down her face. "It is okay," she said through her sobs. "I am here. You are not alone. You can come out now. I will keep you safe." The egg split open and a head emerged, covered in scales of deep red and brilliant gold, with eyes like pools of liquid fire that held intelligence far beyond any mere animal. The hatchling looked at the Kralith soldiers and smoke curled from its tiny nostrils, a warning of the flames it would one day command. Then it looked at Una, and something in those ancient eyes softened. It chirped, a small sound, almost like a bird calling for its mother, and pressed its head against the glass that still separated them. Commander Rue finished the last Kralith soldier and turned to see something that would be recorded in history books across the galaxy. A human child, standing with her hands pressed against glass, crying with joy as a dragon just minutes old tried to reach her. "Open the case," Rue said to the terrified technicians who had hidden during the fight. "Open it now." The glass slid away, and the hatchling tumbled forward into Una's waiting arms, its scales already warm with the fire that burned inside it, its small body curling around her like it had finally found where it belonged. "I will call you Bile," Una whispered, holding the dragon close. "It means star, because you are the brightest thing I have ever seen." The dragon named Bile chirped again and closed its eyes, safe at last in the arms of the first creature to love it in 800 years. 3 days had passed since the hatching, and Bile had already grown to the size of a large dog, a rate of growth that stunned every scientist who studied the ancient records. The dragon followed Una everywhere, sleeping curled around her bed, eating from her hand, and rumbling with what could only be described as contentment whenever she scratched beneath its chin. Jinho Park had recovered from his wounds and now sat in the observation room, watching his daughter play with a creature that could breathe fire and had once been the most feared predator in 3-star systems. "She treats it like a pet," High Scientist Morath said, standing beside him with something like wonder in his usually cold voice. "She treats it like family," Jinho corrected gently. "There is a difference." In the corridor outside, Admiral Chohana had arrived with a full human battle fleet, her ships taking position around the station in a defensive formation that made the Kralith vessels keep their distance. She was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. But when she spoke, even the largest aliens in the room paid attention. "The situation is simple," she said during the emergency session of the Galactic Council that had been convened on the station. "A human child has bonded with a Dracorian hatchling. Both the child and the dragon are under human protection. Any attempt to harm either one will be considered an act of war against the human race." The Kralith representative, a massive warrior covered in ceremonial scars, slammed his fist against the table. "You cannot claim ownership of a Dracorian," he roared. "They belong to no one." Admiral Cho did not flinch. "We are not claiming ownership," she replied calmly. "We are stating facts. Una Park is a human citizen. Bile has bonded with Una Park. Therefore, Bile is under human protection. This is not complicated. The Dracorians were enemies of the Kralith Collective for 10,000 years. The representative continued. They burned our worlds. They killed our ancestors. If they return, they will seek vengeance. Perhaps, Admiral Cho said. Or perhaps they will remember that your people tried to murder a 7-year-old girl to prevent their return. I wonder which memory will burn brighter. The representative fell silent, his scales darkening with anger, but his arguments exhausted. Elder Vrathos stepped forward, his aged body supported by a floating chair, his voice weak, but his words carrying the weight of centuries of knowledge. The Dracorians were never mindless destroyers, he said. They were protectors, guardians who bonded with other species and defended them against those who would do them harm. The Kralith remember only the wars, but the rest of the galaxy remembers the peace that the Dracorians brought wherever they flew. He gestured toward the window, beyond which Yuna could be seen playing with Bile in the garden dome of the station. Look at them, he continued. A human child and a dragon, playing together as if the 800 years of silence never happened. This is not a threat. This is a miracle. As if responding to his words, Bile suddenly lifted its head and looked toward the window, its golden eyes meeting the gazes of everyone in the council chamber. Then it did something that made even Admiral Cho catch her breath. It bowed its head, a gesture of respect that the Dracorians had once used to acknowledge allies and friends. It knows we are watching, Ambassador Quan said softly. It knows, and it is showing us that it means no harm. The moment was broken by alarms screaming through the station once. A gang Kralith soldiers had launched a final desperate assault. Smaller attack craft slipping through the defensive fleet and breaching the garden dome, where Yuna and Bile played Commander Ru reacted instantly, racing toward the garden with her marines, but she knew they would not arrive in time through the security feeds. The council watched in horror as 6 Kralith soldiers surrounded the child and the dragon, their weapons raised and ready to fire. Surrender the beast, the lead soldier commanded. Step away from it, and you will not be harmed. Yuna stood her ground, her small body trembling, but her arms wrapped protectively around Bile's neck. Bile is not a beast, she said, her voice shaking but defiant. Bile is my friend. The soldier raised his weapon, and Bile moved. The dragon stepped in front of Yuna, its body now large enough to shield her completely, its scales glowing with internal heat as smoke poured from its nostrils. For a moment, the council chamber was completely silent. Everyone watching knew what would happen next, knew that Bile could destroy these soldiers in seconds, could burn them to ash with a single breath of the fire that had made Dracorians. The terror of Space Beal opened its mouth, and flame gathered at the back of its throat. Then Yuna put her hand on the dragon's side. No, she said softly. Please do not hurt them, Bile. I do not want you to hurt anyone. The dragon hesitated, the fire still burning in its chest, the ancient instinct to destroy those who threatened its bonded partner screaming for release. But Yuna asked it not to, and so it did not instead. Bile released its fire in a wall of flame between them and the soldiers, a barrier of heat and light that blocked any advance but harmed no one. The Kralith soldiers stumbled backward, their armor heating to dangerous levels, their weapons malfunctioning from the intense temperature. By the time Commander Ru arrived with her marines, the soldiers had retreated, unable to advance past the wall of flame that a hatchling had created to protect a human child. The lead Kralith soldier stared at Bile with something new in his eyes, something that might have been fear or might have been respect. It listened to her, he said, his voice carrying through the communication channel to the council chamber. The dragon could have killed us all, but the child told it not to, and it listened. Admiral Cho stood slowly, a smile spreading across her weathered face. That is why the bond matters, she said to the assembled representatives. The Dracorians are not returning as monsters, they are returning as partners. And their partner species chose mercy over violence. Compassion over revenge. She looked directly at the Kralith representative. Perhaps you should consider what that means for your plans in the Garden Dome. Yuna hugged Bile tight as the wall of flame slowly faded away. Good dragon, she whispered. You are such a good dragon. Bile rumbled with contentment and pressed its massive head against her chest. And in that moment, watching through the screens, the entire galaxy saw something they would never forget. The most powerful predator in the history of space. Gentle as a kitten in the arms of a human child. The negotiation chamber fell silent when Yuna walked through the doors with Bile at her side. The dragon had grown again. Now standing as tall as a horse, its scales gleaming like polished rubies and gold coins. Its eyes burning with ancient intelligence that made even the oldest ambassadors feel like children. But it was the little girl walking beside the dragon that truly captured everyone's attentions. She wore a simple dress, her hair tied back with a ribbon her father had given her that morning, and she held Bile's neck like a child might hold the collar of a beloved dog. This is unusual protocol, one of the council members said nervously. Children are not permitted in diplomatic proceedings. Admiral Cho stood beside Ambassador Quan, her expression making it clear that arguing would be unwise. This child has done more for galactic relations in 1 week than this council has done in a century, she replied. She will be heard. High Commander Zorvax of the Kralith sat at the far end of the chamber, his massive armored body tense with barely controlled fury. But his eyes kept darting to Bile with something that looked very much like fear. He had seen the recordings and watched his soldiers retreat from a wall of flame that a hatchling had created. Had realized that if the dragon grew to full size and decided to seek revenge for the attempted assassinations, his entire species would be in danger. Why have you brought the creature here? He demanded, his voice rough as grinding stones. Yuna stepped forward, and Bile moved with her, the dragon's presence filling the room with warmth that was not entirely physical. Bile is not a creature, Yuna said, her voice small but steady. Bile is my friend, and my friend wanted to meet everyone. She looked around the room at the aliens of every shape and size, at the beings who had argued for days about what to do with her and with the dragon she had awakened. I heard you talking, she continued, on the screens and through the doors. I heard you say that Dracorians are dangerous, that they will hurt people, that they should be destroyed before they can grow strong. She paused and looked up at Bile, who lowered its great head to meet her gaze. But Bile does not want to hurt anyone, Yuna said, turning back to the council. Bile wants to protect people. That is what dragons do. They find someone to love and they protect them forever. Elder Vrathos nodded slowly from his floating chair. The child speaks the truth, he said. The Dracorians were never conquerors. They were guardians. They fought only to protect those they had bonded with. The wars the Kralith remember were wars of defense, fought because the Kralith attacked the Vendari, the species the Dracorians had sworn to protect. Zorvax's scales darkened with anger. Ancient history means nothing, he growled. The Dracorians are a threat to galactic security. They must be contained or eliminated. No, the word came from Yuna. Spoken softly but somehow filling the entire chamber, she walked toward Zorvax and Bile followed, smoke curling from the dragon's nostrils as they approached the being who had tried to have them. Both killed Zorvax's guards moved to intercept them, but Bile let out a low rumble that stopped them in their tracks. You are scared, Yuna said, looking up at the massive Kralith commander with eyes that held no fear, only understanding. You are scared because you did bad things a long time ago, and you think the dragons will remember and punish you. Zorvax said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. Bile remembers, Yuna continued. I can feel it, the memories of the old dragons, the sadness and the anger and the loss. It is all inside Bile like a fire that never went out. The council held its breath. Yuna, reached out and took Zorvax's massive clawed hand in her tiny fingers. "But Bile also remembers what I taught it," she said. "I taught it that being angry does not make things better. I taught it that hurting people who hurt you just makes more hurting. I taught it that the best way to stop being scared is to make friends instead of enemies." She looked back at Bile. "Tell him," she said. "Tell him what you told me." The dragon stepped forward, its burning eyes meeting Zorvax's cold ones, and for a long moment, the two ancient enemies simply stared at each other. Then Bile did something that made Zorvax stumble backward in shock. It bowed not a small bow like it had given the council before, but a deep bow, its head touching the floor in front of the Kralith commander. An ancient gesture of offered peace that the Dracorians had used when they wished to end a conflict. "The dragon offers reconciliation," Elder Vrathus said, his voice thick with emotion. "A Dracorian bow means the past is forgiven, that all debts of blood are paid, that a new beginning is possible if the other party is willing to accept it." Zorvax stood frozen, his entire worldview crumbling around him. "This is a trick," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It is not a trick," Ambassador Quan said, stepping forward. "It is a 7-year-old girl teaching a dragon how to forgive. And now that dragon is teaching you." The chamber waited as Zorvax struggled with a decision that would shape the future of his species. Finally, slowly, the massive Kralith commander lowered himself to one knee, bringing his head level with the dragon that could have destroyed him. "We accept," he said, the words seeming to cost him greatly. "The Kralith Collective accepts the Dracorian offer of peace." Yuna smiled, the bright innocent smile of a child who had just made two friends stop fighting. "See?" she said. "That was not so hard." The negotiations that followed were swift compared to what anyone had expected. Earth would establish a sanctuary for Dracorian rebirth, a place where the 17 remaining eggs in the museum's collection could be brought and matched with human children who possessed the emotional capacity to wake them. The Kralith would withdraw their fleet and sign a formal peace treaty with both humanity and the returning Dracorians. And Unipark, the 7-year-old girl who had hugged a cold egg because it looked lonely, would be recognized as the first dragon partner in 800 years. 1 week later, the Zhenho Park stood on the observation deck of Station Varath Prime. Watching his daughter fly through the stars on the back of a dragon beetle had grown again, large enough now to carry Yuna easily. And they soared through the space around the station with a joy that made everyone who saw them smile. "The official report has been filed," Ambassador Quan said, joining him at the window. "The Galactic Council has acknowledged what happened here as a miracle." Jinho smiled. "Is that what they are calling it?" "It is what it is," Quan replied. "We did not revive the Dracorians through technology or science or any method that made logical sense. We did it the human way." She watched as Yuna and Bile looped around a communications tower, the girl's laughter echoing through the external speakers. A lonely child saw something cold and sad and decided to love it anyway, Quan continued. She did not ask what species it was, or whether it was useful, or what she could gain from helping it. She just saw something that needed love, and she gave it freely. Jinho nodded, his eyes never leaving his daughter. "The galaxy forgot that such things were possible," he said. "They became so focused on technology and power and advancement that they forgot the simplest truth." "What truth is that?" Jinho smiled as Yuna waved at him from Bile's back, the dragon roaring with happiness as they flew toward the distant stars together. "Sometimes all it takes is warmth," he said. "Sometimes all it takes is a hug from someone who cares. And miracles that seemed impossible suddenly become the most natural thing in the universe." High above them, a little girl and her dragon flew through the endless darkness of space, two hearts beating as one, proof that in a galaxy of wonders, The greatest wonder of all was still the simple act of loving something with your whole heart, and so began the age of the dragon partners. The age when humans and Dracorians walked together among the stars. The age that started not with a war or discovery or a great scientific achievement, but with a 7-year-old girl who hugged a cold egg and whispered that it was not alone anymore.